All right, let's jump right into this explainer and take a wildly fast, chronological roller coaster ride through 1,200 years of Roman history. We're going to cover the whole shebang, from its pretty petty, mythical birth all the way to its self-inflicted collapse. The story of Rome is absolutely fascinating, and today, well, we're going to visualize exactly how a tiny settlement turned into the ancient world's ultimate superpower before completely falling apart. To keep us perfectly on track through over a millennium of dense, dramatic history, we're going to follow this six-part visual roadmap. We'll start with myth and murder, move through their violent expansion, tackle Caesar's chaos, enter the Golden Age, watch corruption take root, and finally, witness the collapse of the West.
So, let's kick things off with Section 1, Myth, Murder, and Rome's Founding. According to the myth, before Rome even existed, a rightful heir miraculously gets pregnant by Mars, the god of war, and gives birth to twin boys, Romulus and Remus. Now, the ruling usurper king tries to just toss these babies into a river to drown, but they wash ashore, get fed by a female wolf, and grow into incredibly strong troublemakers. Once they grow up and overthrow that bad uncle, they decide to build their own city. But this triggers a bizarre, petty sibling argument over which hill to build on. Romulus starts building this tiny wall, and Remus, being an absolute menace, hops over it just to mock him. So Romulus decides murder is the appropriate response here, kills his brother, and literally just like that, the Roman kingdom is born.
Okay, so Romulus is now king. But at this point, Rome is basically just an ambitious homeless camp. To populate his new city, Romulus created an asylum city, essentially inviting anyone on the run. We're talking runaway slaves, debt dodgers, exiles, criminals, guys who stole goats, you name it. But Romulus quickly realizes they have a massive problem on their hands. They have exactly 0 women. To solve this, Rome hosts a massive festival, invites their neighbors, the Sabines, and mid-party, the Romans just kidnap all the Sabine women. It's essentially an 8th century BC mass kidnapping event. The Sabine men predictably attack, but the women step right between the armies, tell everyone to stop being stupid, and demand the two groups just merge. And awkwardly enough, they actually do.
After suffering through a total of 7 kings, the last of whom was so incredibly cruel that the people expelled him and created a republic just to ensure no single man could ever be king again, Rome faced a massive crisis. They elected 2 consuls to share power, thinking they had it all figured out, right? But then the Gauls from modern-day France showed up. They invaded Rome, looted it, burned most of it to the ground, and only left when the Romans paid them a massive, humiliating ransom in gold. This was the ultimate low point. Rome's villain arc was officially triggered right here. They decided right then and there that they could never, ever be humiliated like that again.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Republic's violent expansion.
Deciding they could never be victims again, this now paranoid Roman Republic adopted an ultra-militaristic strategy. Basically, conquer absolutely everything that isn't nailed to the ground. They started locally, flattening neighboring tribes and Greek colonies. But their real challenge was Carthage, a wildly wealthy superpower in North Africa with a massive navy. This violent expansion is perfectly summarized by the Punic Wars. Think of them as 3 blockbuster sequels of chaos where Rome systematically destroyed their only real rival. In the first war, Rome literally stole Carthage's ship designs to reverse engineer their own navy and win. In the Second War, the legendary Hannibal marched 50,000 troops and 37 elephants over the Alps, wrecking Rome for years before Rome ultimately turned the tables. And in the Third War, Rome decided Carthage's mere existence bothered them, so they enslaved the population and completely deleted the city from the timeline.
Moving right along to Section 3, Caesar, Chaos, and Empire. Now entirely addicted to expansion, the Republic unknowingly set the stage for its own final boss, Julius Caesar. Just to grasp the sheer scale of this bloodlust, by this point Rome had conquered a staggering 10% of humanity and enslaved another 2%. And a lot of this was to avenge that 330-year-old grudge against the Gauls. The man who dealt the final blow in Gaul was Julius Caesar. He conquered all of France, dipped into Belgium, and even invaded Britain. He became so insanely powerful that the paranoid Roman Senate ordered him to leave his army behind and return to Rome alone. Caesar refused, marched his loyal troops right across the border, and took the capital.
Now, what's really interesting here is the massive paradigm shift in how Caesar was viewed. We often think of him today as this evil dictator, but regular Romans actually loved him. He fixed their chaotic calendar, giving us the 365-day year and the month of July. He lowered taxes, canceled debts, and regulated the grain supply so the poor wouldn't starve. But the Senate? Oh, they were terrified. They saw him collecting titles like Pokemon cards, dictator, consul, head priest. They thought he was making himself a king. So to quote-unquote save the republic, they murdered him right in the middle of a Senate meeting. But they miscalculated terribly. The public was furious that their champion was dead, and this sparked the ultimate civil war.
That takes us to Section 4, Augustus and the Golden Age.
Out of the ashes of Caesar's assassination and Mark Antony's defeat, an 18-year-old named Octavius usurps total power. He declared himself first citizen, was named Augustus by the Senate, and in 27 BC, the Roman Empire is officially born. But Augustus was a genius. He wasn't just trying to be impressive, he was trying to be permanent. He realized the old republic failed because armies belonged to generals. If a general promised you land, you fought for him, even if that meant fighting against Rome itself. So Augustus brilliantly created a professional, state-paid standing army. Soldiers enlisted for 20 years, got regular pay from the government, and a guaranteed retirement package. Loyalty finally flowed upward to the state, single-handedly fueling Rome's golden age and removing the main fuel for civil wars.
However, this newfound stability had strict limits. Augustus shifted Rome's strategy from endless expansion to just securing their borders. But in 9 AD, a Roman general named Varus marched 3 legions into the forests of Germania. He was guided by Arminius, a Germanic man trained in Roman warfare who pretended to be an ally. Actually, Arminius knew exactly what Rome's weakness was. They absolutely couldn't fight in dense, muddy forests where their strict formations fell apart. He led them into a trap in the Teutoburg forest, and it was an absolute slaughter. 20,000 professional Roman soldiers were wiped out. Rome was traumatized, abandoned the idea of conquering Germania for good, and permanently made the Rhine River their defensive frontier.
Let's move to Section 5, Corruption and the Praetorian Guard.
Let's see how this incredible stability crumbles. When Augustus died, his adopted son Tiberius took over. But Tiberius was deeply introverted and kinda hated being in public, so he moved to the island of Capri and tried to rule from there. This was a massive mistake. Because power no longer flowed through actual institutions, his absence left a huge vacuum in Rome, which was quickly filled by the Praetorian Guard. Originally an elite protective unit created by Augustus, these heavily armed soldiers were stationed right in the capital. With the emperor hiding on an island, the Guard's commander became the filter for all information. They quickly realized they held the real power. Years later, when Emperor Caligula got too cocky, the Guard didn't just complain. They simply executed him and handpicked his uncle Claudius to be the replacement right there on the spot.
This set a truly terrifying precedent. The emperor was no longer chosen by tradition or public consensus. He was chosen by the guys with swords standing closest to him. After Emperor Nero bankrupted the state, burned half of Rome, and ultimately took his own life when he lost the military's backing, the whole system completely broke. The domino effect of this corruption culminated in the chaotic year of 69 AD, known as the Year of the Four Emperors. 4 different men claimed the throne in a single year just because different armies backed them. Vespasian finally won, not because he was the most qualified leader, but simply because he had the strongest army. The secret was out. Whoever controlled the military controlled Rome.
And finally, Section 6, the collapse of the West.
The 3rd century was an absolute nightmare for Rome. Plagues, hyperinflation, and emperors being violently assassinated every other week. To survive, they literally chopped the empire's administration into multiple pieces. And Emperor Constantine eventually moved the real center of power east to a new Christian city, Constantinople. The West was basically left as a decaying ghost province. But the final blow wasn't some giant cinematic battle. It was a chain reaction of uncontrolled migration. The fearsome Huns exploded out of the Eurasian steppe, pushing the Goths right up to the Roman border. The Goths asked for asylum. Rome let them in, but corrupt Roman officials starved and exploited them terribly. So the Goths revolted, and at the Battle of Adrianople, they destroyed a Roman army and killed the emperor. The crucial takeaway here? Corrupt officials imported a future civil war they couldn't manage.
Once that psychological border broke, it was game over. Other groups just poured in. The Vandals took North Africa, completely cutting off Rome's grain and tax money. And hey, without money, you can't pay soldiers. The city of Rome itself was sacked multiple times simply because it was vulnerable. Finally, in 476 AD, we reached the end of the line. The last Western emperor was a boy, ironically named Romulus Augustulus, literally carrying the names of Rome's mythic founder and its first emperor. But there was no epic final stand. He was essentially just politely asked to step down by a Germanic commander. The Western Empire died with a whimper, surrendering to utter systemic fatigue.
As we wrap up this explainer, we have to ask a really provocative question. Did the Roman Empire actually fall in 476 AD? Remember how the empire split? The eastern half, ruled from Constantinople, was incredibly rich, deeply fortified, and very much alive. Modern historians call them the Byzantines just to keep things simple, but to the people living there, they were the Roman Empire. And they fought off Persians, Arabs, and Crusaders, keeping that Roman identity alive for an entire millennium, only finally falling to the Ottomans in 1453. So did Rome really fall in 476, or did it just change its address and language for another 1,000 years? That's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for exploring the roller coaster of Roman history with me.